Upgrade your standards. How to expect more from yourself and create the life you want. Published by Midnight Audiobook. Introduction. Your life does not always give you what you want. Often, it gives you what you repeatedly accept. The habits you tolerate, the treatment you allow, the excuses you make, and the choices you repeat quietly become the standard of your life. You may want better results, better relationships, greater confidence, more discipline, or a more meaningful life. But wanting more is only the beginning. The deeper question is, what are you willing to accept from yourself every day? Upgrading your standards does not mean becoming perfect. It does not mean expecting perfection from others. It means becoming more honest about what you want, what you value, and what no longer deserves a place in your life. It means expecting more from yourself and allowing your actions to match those expectations. This book will help you recognize the standards shaping your life, question the old ones, and build better ones. You will learn how to make stronger choices, protect your time and peace, improve your relationships, and stay committed when life becomes difficult. By the end, the goal is not simply to have higher standards. It is to become the person who naturally lives by them. Your life can rise, but first, your standard must rise with it. Chapter 1. The life your standards are creating. A person can dream about a better life for years without changing much at all. They can want more money, better relationships, stronger health, greater confidence, or more peace. They can even make plans every January and promise themselves that this year will be different. Yet months later, everything looks almost the same. The reason is often not a lack of desire. It is the standard they continue to live by. Your standards are the invisible rules you set for your life. They influence what you consider acceptable, what you expect from yourself, what you tolerate from others, and how seriously you take your own goals. Most of the time, you do not think about these rules, you simply follow them. If you believe being late is normal, you may continue arriving late. If you believe breaking promises to yourself is harmless, you may keep postponing important changes. If you believe disrespect is something you must tolerate to keep a relationship, you may remain in situations that slowly damage your confidence. None of these choices may seem important on their own, but repeated choices create patterns, and patterns eventually create a lifestyle. Think about the small things you allow every day. Maybe you spend an hour scrolling when you promised yourself you would work. Maybe you keep saying yes when you really want to say no. Maybe you stay around people who constantly criticize you. Maybe you keep telling yourself that you will start tomorrow. One small compromise does not seem powerful, but when the same compromise happens again and again, it becomes a standard. This is why your life can sometimes be very different from what you say you want. Your words may say, "I want better." Your standards may say, "This is good enough." There is nothing wrong with wanting comfort. There is nothing wrong with resting, making mistakes, or having difficult days. A higher standard does not mean forcing yourself to be productive every moment or becoming harsh with yourself. It means knowing the difference between a temporary struggle and a permanent pattern. For example, missing one workout because you are exhausted is not a low standard, but constantly making excuses while telling yourself that your health matters is a different story. Having one difficult conversation with someone you love is normal. Repeatedly accepting disrespect because you are afraid of losing the relationship is something else. The difference is consistency. Your standards are revealed more clearly by what you repeatedly do than by what you occasionally say. This idea can be uncomfortable because it puts responsibility back into your hands. It is easier to believe that your life will improve when circumstances change, when someone finally appreciates you, when you get a better opportunity, or when you feel more motivated. Sometimes circumstances really do need to change, but there is another question worth asking. What am I allowing to remain unchanged? Imagine two people who both want to become more confident. One waits until they feel confident before taking action. The other decides that confidence will come from keeping small promises, speaking honestly, learning from mistakes, and doing difficult things even when they feel uncomfortable. Over time, the second person develops a different relationship with themselves. They begin to trust themselves because their actions repeatedly prove that they can depend on themselves. That is what higher standards can do. They change the way you see yourself. When you start keeping promises to yourself, you build self-trust. When you protect your time, you learn that your time matters. When you stop accepting constant disrespect, you strengthen your sense of self-respect. When you finish what you start, you develop confidence in your ability to follow through. The change may look small from the outside, but it can be enormous inside your mind. You begin to think, I am someone who follows through. I am someone who chooses carefully. I am someone who does not need to betray myself to make other people comfortable. These beliefs are powerful because identity influences behavior. Once you begin seeing yourself differently, your choices often begin to change with you. But there is one important warning. Raising your standards should never become an excuse to hate your current self. You are not upgrading your standards because you are worthless as you are. You are upgrading them because you believe your life is worth improving. There is a difference between self-rejection and self-respect. Self-rejection says, I am not good enough. Self-respect says, I can become better and I am willing to do the work. That distinction matters. Your goal is not to create a perfect life. Your goal is to create a life that reflects what truly matters to you. You may still fail. You may still procrastinate sometimes. You may still make poor decisions. The difference is that mistakes no longer have to become your identity. You can return to your standard. You can begin again. You can choose differently. The first step is simply to become aware of the standard you are already living by. Look at your daily life without excuses and without judgment. Look at your habits. Look at your relationships. Look at how you use your time. Look at what you repeatedly tolerate. Then ask yourself a simple but powerful question. If I continue living this way for the next 5 years, will I be proud of the life I create? Your answer can tell you more than you think. Because the future is rarely created by one huge decision. It is created by hundreds of ordinary decisions repeated over time, and every day you are setting a standard. The real question is whether that standard is taking you toward the life you want or quietly keeping you away from it. The standard starts with you. You do not need to change everything today. Start by noticing one area where you have been accepting less than you know you can give, choose, or become. Then make one better decision. A higher standard begins with a single decision that says, this is no longer how I want to live. That decision may seem small, but repeated long enough, it can change everything. Chapter 2. Stop living by your old rules. There is a strange thing about old rules. You can follow them for years without remembering who taught you to believe them. Maybe you learned that being successful means never saying no. Maybe you learned that asking for more is selfish. Maybe you learned that people like you only when you make them happy. Maybe you learned that failure means you are not capable. Or perhaps you simply watched the people around you and quietly decided, this is how life works. Years pass. You grow older. Your circumstances change. Your responsibilities change. Your dreams change. But some of those old rules remain exactly where they were, and you keep living by them, not because they are still right, but because they are familiar. Familiarity can be powerful. When you have lived with a belief for a long time, it can feel like a fact. You may not even question it. You simply build decisions around it. A person who believes they must always please others may say yes when they want to say no. A person who believes money is difficult to earn may avoid opportunities that require confidence. Someone who believes they are not disciplined may stop trying whenever a challenge becomes uncomfortable. Someone who believes they are not worthy of respect may stay quiet when others cross their boundaries. The rule operates quietly. The person follows it automatically. Then they wonder why their life never changes. Consider someone named Daniel. Growing up, Daniel watched his parents work hard and struggle financially. He heard phrases like, "People like us cannot afford that," and "You should be happy with what you have." There was nothing wrong with learning gratitude. But Daniel slowly connected ambition with greed. He began believing that wanting more was somehow wrong. As an adult, he had the ability to apply for better positions, learn new skills, and improve his financial situation. But whenever an opportunity appeared, he found reasons to stay where he was. He told himself he was being realistic. But underneath that explanation was an old rule: do not ask for too much. Daniel did not need to become a completely different person. He needed to question a belief that no longer served him. That is an important part of raising your standards. You do not always need to add something new. Sometimes you need to remove an old limitation. Your past can explain you, but it does not have to control you. The environment you grew up in may have influenced how you think about money, relationships, work, confidence, failure, or success. Your previous experiences may have taught you to protect yourself in certain ways. Some of those lessons were useful. Others may have been necessary for a past version of your life, but harmful to the person you are becoming. This is where maturity requires honesty. Ask yourself, is this truly my belief, or is it simply a belief I inherited? That question can open a door. You may discover that you have been following standards that were never consciously chosen. Perhaps you believe you must work constantly to prove your value. Perhaps you believe successful people must sacrifice everything. Perhaps you believe a good person should always be available. Perhaps you believe making mistakes means you should stop. Perhaps you believe changing direction means you have failed. But who decided that? And more importantly, does that belief help you build the life you want? Not every old rule deserves to be destroyed. Some should be kept. Honesty, kindness, responsibility, loyalty, and integrity may remain important throughout your life. The goal is not to reject everything from your past. The goal is to examine it. Keep what makes you stronger. Release what keeps you smaller. This can be difficult because old standards often feel safe. Even an unhappy routine can feel safer than an uncertain future. A person may complain about their job for years, but still fear applying somewhere else. Someone may feel lonely in a relationship, but fear being alone. Another person may dislike their lifestyle, but resist changing their daily routine. Why? Because the known is predictable. But predictable does not always mean healthy. Sometimes the life you call comfortable is simply the life you have become accustomed to. Raising your standards requires you to become comfortable questioning yourself, not judging yourself, not attacking yourself, questioning yourself. What am I doing because I truly believe in it? What am I doing because I am afraid? What have I accepted simply because I have accepted it for a long time? What would I choose if I were not trying to protect my old identity? These questions are powerful because they separate your present self from your past conditioning. You may realize that you have been carrying an old version of yourself into a new chapter. But you are allowed to change. You are allowed to discover that something you once wanted no longer matters. You are allowed to become more ambitious. You are allowed to become calmer. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to change your circle. You are allowed to expect more from yourself. Growth often begins with a sentence that feels uncomfortable. I no longer believe that this is good enough for me. That does not make you ungrateful. It means you are becoming conscious. Your old rules were written by your experiences. Your new standards can be written by your values, and there is an important difference. Experiences tell you what happened. Values tell you what you want to stand for. Once you understand that difference, you stop asking, "What have I always done?" and start asking, "What kind of person do I want to become?" That is a much better question, because you cannot build a different future while obeying every rule from your past. Some rules helped you survive. Now it is time to decide which rules will help you grow. Write your own rules. Take a quiet moment and identify one belief you have carried for years. Maybe it concerns money, work, relationships, confidence, failure, or your own ability. Then ask whether that belief still deserves authority over your life. If it does, keep it. If it does not, replace it. Your past may have written the first draft of your standards, but your future gives you the chance to rewrite them. Chapter 3. Decide what better means to you. There is a quiet trap in personal growth, believing that a better life must look like someone else's life. You see someone with a successful career and decide you need the same career. You see someone traveling constantly and assume freedom means traveling. You see someone with an expensive house, a large audience, or a busy social life, and suddenly your own life feels smaller. Without realizing traveling you begin upgrading your standards according to someone else's definition of success. That can leave you working harder while feeling less satisfied. A higher standard is not simply about having more, it is about having what genuinely matters to you. For one person, a better life may mean earning more money and building a business. For another, it may mean having enough money to work fewer hours and spend more time with family. Someone may want recognition and responsibility, while another person may value privacy, stability, and peace. Neither person is necessarily aiming too high or too low. They are simply measuring their lives differently. The problem begins when you never choose your own measurement. Many people move through life collecting goals from their surroundings. Their family expects one thing. Their friends admire each other. Society celebrates something else. Social media adds hundreds of new images of what a successful life supposedly looks like. Eventually, it becomes difficult to hear your own preferences beneath all that noise. A person may spend years chasing a promotion they never truly wanted. Someone else may buy things they cannot comfortably afford because they believe success should look expensive. Another may fill every hour with work because being busy has become their definition of importance. They achieve the goal and still feel strangely empty. This is why raising your standards must begin with clarity. Before demanding more from your life, you need to know what more actually means. Maybe you want more peace. Maybe you want deeper relationships. Maybe you want stronger health. Maybe you want meaningful work. Maybe you want financial freedom. Maybe you want the confidence to make decisions without constantly needing approval. Your answer can change over time. That is normal. You are not creating a permanent contract with yourself. You are deciding what deserves your attention at this stage of your life. One useful way to think about this is to separate appearance from experience. Appearance is what your life looks like from the outside. Experience is what your life actually feels like from the inside. A person can have an impressive title and feel exhausted every morning. Another can have a modest career and feel proud of the work they do. Someone can have hundreds of social connections and still feel lonely. Another can have a small circle and feel deeply understood. The outside picture does not always tell the truth. Your standards should be connected to the life you experience, not merely the life other people can see. This does not mean you should stop being ambitious. Ambition can be healthy when it comes from purpose rather than comparison. Wanting to improve your skills, earn more, build something meaningful, or reach a difficult goal can give your life direction. The important part is knowing why you want it. If you want more money because it gives you freedom and security, that is meaningful. If you want more money only because you are afraid that other people will think you are unsuccessful, you may never feel that you have enough. The same goal can come from completely different places. Your standards become stronger when they are built on values. Values are the principles that matter to you even when nobody is watching. They might include honesty, family, independence, growth, creativity, courage, responsibility, kindness, stability, or freedom. When your goals are connected to your values, decisions become easier. Suppose you value family deeply, but also value career growth. You may decide that success means building a career without sacrificing every evening and weekend. That standard may lead you to make different choices from someone whose highest priority is professional achievement. Neither approach is automatically better. The important thing is that your life belongs to you. This becomes especially important as you get older. What once felt important may lose its importance. A goal that made sense at 20 may not make sense at 40. A lifestyle that once excited you may eventually leave you tired. Changing your priorities is not weakness. It can be evidence that you understand yourself better. There is also freedom in realizing that you do not need to improve every area of your life at the same time. You can choose what matters most. Perhaps your first priority is your health. Perhaps it is rebuilding your finances. Perhaps it is becoming more present with your family. Perhaps it is learning to protect your time. Once you know the area that matters most, your standards become easier to define. Instead of saying, "I want a better life," make the idea specific. A better life might mean going to bed at a reasonable time because your health matters. It might mean refusing to spend money simply to impress people. It might mean choosing work that challenges you without consuming your entire identity. It might mean having conversations instead of avoiding them. It might mean spending less time with people who constantly pull you toward the person you are trying to leave behind. These choices may not look dramatic, but they create a life that feels more aligned. The goal is not to build a life that impresses everyone. The goal is to build a life you respect when nobody is watching. That requires courage, because your definition of better may disappoint people who benefited from your old priorities. Some people may not understand why you changed. They may think you are becoming too ambitious, too selective, too disciplined, or too focused. You do not need everyone to understand. A standard becomes meaningful when you are willing to live by it, even without applause. Your life becomes clearer when you stop measuring it against everyone else's scoreboard. There will always be someone earning more, achieving faster, owning more, or appearing happier. If your definition of success depends on staying ahead of everyone else, peace will always be out of reach. Choose a different measure. Let your standard be progress with purpose. Let success mean becoming more capable without losing yourself. Let a better life mean one that reflects your values, protects what matters, and gives you room to become the person you want to be. You do not need someone else's version of better. You need a definition that is honest enough to guide your choices, and once that definition becomes clear, raising your standards becomes much easier because you finally know what you are raising them toward. Chapter 4. The Promise You Make to Yourself. A person can make hundreds of promises in a lifetime. Some are made to parents, partners, friends, children, colleagues, or employers. But one relationship is often forgotten in the process: the relationship with yourself. You say you will start exercising. You say you will save money. You decide to learn a skill, finish a project, wake up earlier, spend less time online, or finally have an important conversation. At the moment, the promise feels sincere. Then life becomes busy. The promise gets delayed. A few days later, another promise replaces it. Nothing dramatic happens. No one confronts you. No alarm goes off. Yet something important is happening quietly. Every time you repeatedly break your own commitments, you teach yourself that your intentions do not have to become actions. That lesson can become expensive. A person who does not trust their own word finds it difficult to build confidence. They may have talent, knowledge, and ambition, but deep inside they are uncertain whether they will actually follow through. This is why personal standards begin with self-trust. Self-trust is not created by telling yourself that you are capable. It grows when your behavior gives you evidence. Suppose you decide to read 10 pages every evening. 10 pages may seem insignificant, but if you keep that commitment for months, the real achievement is not the number of pages. You have created proof that you can make a decision and honor it. The same principle applies to larger goals. A person who wants to start a business does not suddenly become disciplined on the day the business opens. The discipline is built through hundreds of smaller decisions before that moment. Learning when they do not feel like learning. Finishing work when nobody is checking. Improving after mistakes. Protecting time from distractions. Small promises become evidence. Evidence becomes confidence. Confidence makes bigger promises believable. This is one reason people sometimes remain stuck, even when they know exactly what they should do. They have spent so much time disappointing themselves that another plan feels meaningless. The answer is not to create an even bigger plan. It is to create a smaller promise and keep it. Imagine someone who has spent years telling himself that he will become healthier. Every Monday he creates a demanding routine. By Thursday, the routine disappears. Eventually, he stops believing his own promises. Instead of starting another extreme plan, he chooses one simple commitment: 30 minutes of movement, 5 days a week. It does not sound impressive, but he keeps it. After several weeks, something changes. He no longer sees himself as someone who is always starting and stopping. He begins to see himself as someone who follows through. That identity is worth more than temporary motivation. A higher standard should therefore begin with honesty. Do not promise yourself a lifestyle you are unwilling to support. Do not create goals simply because they sound impressive. Do not make commitments based on a version of yourself that exists only when you are excited. Choose standards you are genuinely prepared to live by. This does not mean thinking small. It means building strength realistically. You can aim high while respecting the process required to get there. A person who wants to become financially secure may begin by tracking spending. Someone who wants a stronger career may spend an hour developing a valuable skill each day. Someone who wants healthier relationships may begin by communicating honestly instead of avoiding difficult conversations. The standard becomes practical. It moves from an idea into behavior. This is also where responsibility becomes important. Expecting more from yourself means accepting that your choices matter. Your circumstances may not always be fair. Other people may disappoint you. Opportunities may be limited. Unexpected problems will appear. You cannot control all of that, but you can control the quality of your response. Blaming everything outside yourself can feel comfortable because it removes responsibility, yet it also removes power. If every problem is someone else's fault, your ability to change remains in someone else's hands. Personal responsibility gives that power back to you. It does not mean blaming yourself for everything. It means focusing on the part that belongs to you. If you made a poor decision, learn from it. If you wasted time, change how you use the next hour. If you hurt someone, take responsibility and repair what you can. If you failed, study the failure instead of turning it into an identity. A higher standard does not demand that you never fall. It demands that you do not make falling an excuse to remain on the ground. There is another side to this principle: compassion. Some people here expect more from yourself and immediately become harsh. They turn every mistake into evidence that they are lazy, weak, or incapable. That approach may create pressure, but it rarely creates lasting growth. You can hold yourself accountable without attacking yourself. A missed day does not erase months of progress. A poor decision does not erase your ability to make a better one. A setback does not cancel your potential. Strong standards leave room for recovery. Think about an athlete preparing for a major competition. Training hard matters, but recovery matters too. Rest is not the opposite of progress. It is part of progress. Your life works in a similar way. Sometimes the strongest decision is to push forward. Sometimes it is to pause, recover, and return with greater clarity. The goal is not maximum effort every moment. The goal is dependable effort over time. When you begin living this way, something subtle happens. You stop needing to prove yourself to everyone else. Your confidence becomes less dependent on praise because you have your own evidence. You know what you have done. You know what you have survived. You know which promises you have kept. You know that when you say something matters, your actions are beginning to reflect it. That is a powerful place to stand. Expecting more from yourself is ultimately an act of respect. You are saying that your time matters enough to protect, your goals matter enough to pursue, your values matter enough to defend, and your future matters enough to prepare for. The standard becomes personal, not a performance for other people, not a competition with strangers, a commitment between who you are today and who you are capable of becoming. Chapter 5. Raise the standard of what you accept. A quiet form of self-neglect happens when something bothers you, but you keep living with it anyway. You notice the constant criticism. You notice the broken promises. You notice the habit that is wasting your time. You notice the conversations that leave you drained. You notice the way you keep postponing something important. At first, these things feel uncomfortable. Then they become familiar. Eventually, they become normal. That is how low standards can enter a life, not through one major decision, but through repeated acceptance. People often think of standards as expectations, but standards also define limits. They determine where you draw the line between something you can work through and something you are no longer willing to carry. This distinction matters because life will always contain imperfect situations. People make mistakes, plans fail, work becomes stressful, relationships go through difficult periods. You cannot remove every problem from your life. The goal is not to create a life without difficulty. The goal is to stop confusing difficulty with something that must be tolerated forever. Consider a person who works in an environment where their effort is constantly ignored. They complain about it to friends, feel frustrated every evening, and promise themselves they will eventually look for something better. Months turn into years. Perhaps they cannot leave immediately. Financial responsibilities may make a sudden change impossible, but they can still begin preparing. They can improve their skills, update their resume, build connections, save money, or explore other opportunities. A higher standard does not always mean walking away today. Sometimes it means preparing yourself so you can walk away tomorrow. The same principle applies to relationships. Healthy relationships require patience. Nobody communicates perfectly. Everyone has difficult moments, but there is a difference between occasional conflict and a pattern of disrespect. There is a difference between forgiving a mistake and repeatedly accepting the same harmful behavior without change. Standards help you recognize that difference. When you have no clear standard, almost anything can become negotiable. You keep adjusting yourself to preserve comfort. You become quieter when you should speak. You accept less when you should ask for more. You remain where you are because leaving feels harder than staying. Over time, the cost becomes personal. Every time you repeatedly ignore something important, you send yourself a message about what you are willing to live with. That message affects self-respect. Self-respect is not built only through achievements. It is also built through boundaries. A boundary is simply a clear decision about what you will and will not participate in. It might mean protecting your time, refusing unnecessary demands, limiting harmful conversations, or saying no to something that conflicts with your values. Saying no can feel uncomfortable, especially if you've spent years trying to keep everyone happy. But being available to everyone can mean becoming unavailable to yourself. A person who says yes to every request may appear generous. Yet if those commitments leave them exhausted, resentful, and unable to handle their own responsibilities, the generosity is no longer healthy. Higher standards create a better balance. You can care about people without carrying everything for them. You can be kind without accepting disrespect. You can forgive without giving someone unlimited access to hurt you again. You can be flexible without abandoning your values. This is where emotional maturity becomes important. Raising your standards is not about becoming demanding or difficult. It is about becoming clear. Clarity reduces confusion. When you know what matters to you, decisions become easier. You do not have to negotiate with yourself every time a situation challenges your values. For example, if you decide that your health is a priority, you may stop treating sleep as optional. If financial stability matters to you, you may stop making purchases simply to impress people. If family matters deeply, you may protect certain hours of the week for meaningful time together. The standard turns priorities into behavior. It also changes how you respond to your own excuses. Imagine someone who repeatedly spends hours on their phone while complaining that they never have enough time. The issue may not be a lack of time. It may be a standard that allows distraction to take priority over intention. Once they recognize this, they can make a different decision. The goal is not to remove every enjoyable distraction. It is to stop allowing temporary pleasure to repeatedly control important parts of life. The same applies to personal growth. If you constantly tell yourself that you are too tired to learn, too busy to exercise, too nervous to speak, or too inexperienced to begin, those explanations can eventually become invisible boundaries. Sometimes they are legitimate. Sometimes they are habits wearing the appearance of reasons. A higher standard requires honest judgment. You need to know when you genuinely need rest and when you are simply avoiding discomfort. That awareness protects you from two extremes. One is accepting too little, the other is demanding too much. Neither creates a healthy life. The strongest standards are firm without being rigid. They leave room for human weakness while refusing to let weakness become your permanent identity. They allow mistakes while expecting responsibility. They allow rest while protecting progress. They allow forgiveness while maintaining boundaries. Most importantly, they give you permission to change what no longer fits the person you are becoming. Your standards may need to change as your life changes. What was acceptable during one season may not be acceptable in another. A lifestyle that worked when you were younger may become exhausting later. A relationship dynamic that once felt harmless may eventually become unhealthy. Growth often requires updating the limits you live by. You do not have to justify every change to everyone around you. When your priorities become clearer, some old choices will naturally lose their place. And that is part of upgrading your standards. You begin choosing peace over unnecessary conflict. You begin choosing growth over comfortable stagnation. You begin choosing self-respect over constant approval. You begin choosing a future you value over habits that only serve the present moment. The things you accept shape the life you experience. When you become more selective about what receives your time, energy, attention, and trust, your life gradually becomes more intentional. Higher standards are not walls built to keep life out. They are filters that help you decide what deserves to stay. Chapter 6. Your choices become your standards. Life-changing decisions rarely arrive with dramatic music or a clear announcement. Most of them look ordinary. You wake up and decide whether to get out of bed when you plan to. You receive a difficult message and decide how to respond. You earn money and decide where it goes. You have an hour of free time and decide what deserves it. These moments may seem too small to matter. They matter more than you think. Your standards become visible through your choices. What you repeatedly choose eventually becomes the way you live, and the way you live gradually shapes the person you become. Consider the difference between intention and behavior. Someone may genuinely want to become healthier, more disciplined, financially secure, or more successful. But when the moment arrives, their choices may point in another direction. They want to save money, but they spend whenever they feel stressed. They want to improve their career, but they spend their free time avoiding difficult learning. They want stronger relationships, but they avoid honest conversations. They want peace, but they repeatedly give their attention to unnecessary conflict. The desire is real. The pattern is stronger. This does not mean every poor choice reveals a character flaw. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has moments of weakness. The important issue is repetition. One careless decision is an event. Repeated careless decisions become a pattern. Patterns become standards. That is why upgrading your standards requires attention to ordinary choices. You do not need to change your entire life in one weekend. You need to notice the decisions that repeatedly move you away from the person you want to become. Perhaps you keep giving your best energy to distractions and your leftover energy to your goals. Perhaps you constantly choose immediate comfort over long-term progress. Perhaps you agree to things you do not have time for and then feel resentful. Perhaps you keep postponing an important task because starting feels uncomfortable. None of these choices is necessarily disastrous, but repeated often enough, they create a direction. Your direction matters more than your occasional effort. Think of two people who receive the same opportunity to learn a valuable skill. Both are interested. Both have enough time. One studies whenever motivation appears. The other creates a regular schedule and continues even when the excitement disappears. After 6 months, the difference may look like talent. It is usually consistency. The second person has not necessarily made better choices every day. They have simply made enough aligned choices to create momentum. This is one of the most important ideas in personal growth. Small choices accumulate. A few minutes of reading can become knowledge. A few careful financial decisions can become savings. A few honest conversations can strengthen a relationship. A few disciplined mornings can become a dependable routine. A few moments of courage can change the direction of a career. The reverse is also true. Small compromises accumulate. A little wasted time becomes lost hours. A few unnecessary purchases become financial pressure. Avoiding one difficult conversation becomes emotional distance. Repeated excuses become a lifestyle. Your future is being influenced by these small moments, even when you cannot see the result yet. This is why you should stop measuring every choice by its immediate reward. Some choices feel good now, but create problems later. Others feel uncomfortable now, but create freedom later. Going to bed on time may feel less exciting than staying awake for another hour, but tomorrow's energy has value. Saving money may feel less satisfying than an impulsive purchase, but future security has value. Starting a difficult project may feel uncomfortable, but completing it can create confidence and opportunity. Higher standards require you to think beyond the present moment. You begin asking yourself to consider the person who will experience the consequences of today's choices. That person is you. Your future self will live with what you repeatedly choose today. This does not mean every decision must be serious. Life should contain pleasure, spontaneity, rest, and fun. A high standard is not a life where every minute is optimized. It is a life where your choices are intentional enough to protect what matters. You can enjoy a lazy afternoon without becoming lazy. You can spend money on something you love without becoming financially careless. You can take a break without abandoning your goals. You can say yes to enjoyment while still saying yes to responsibility. Balance becomes easier when your priorities are clear. Another powerful change happens when you stop asking whether a choice is good or bad and start asking whether it is aligned. A choice can be perfectly acceptable and still be wrong for your current priorities. Watching a movie is not bad, but if you plan to study for an important exam and have already avoided the work for 3 days, the choice may not be aligned with your goal. Working late is not always good or bad. But if you constantly sacrifice sleep and family time for work that could have been completed with better planning, something is out of balance. Alignment brings context. It allows you to make decisions based on the life you are trying to create, rather than following rigid rules. Your standards also become stronger when you make decisions before temptation arrives. If you know that your phone destroys your concentration, putting it away before beginning important work is easier than relying on willpower after distractions appear. If you want to save money, deciding your spending limits before shopping is easier than trying to resist every impulse in the moment. If you value your health, planning your meals and exercise beforehand reduces the number of decisions you need to make when you are tired. Good standards become easier to follow when they are built into your routines. Eventually, your choices begin to feel less like battles. You no longer need to negotiate with yourself every morning about whether your goals matter. Your behavior starts reflecting what you have already decided matters. That is when a standard becomes part of your identity. You are not simply trying to act disciplined. You are becoming someone who values discipline. You are not simply trying to protect your time. You are becoming someone who respects time. You are not simply trying to make better choices. You are becoming someone who chooses with intention. The transformation is gradual, but it is real. Every choice tells a small story about the life you are building. Some stories will be imperfect. Some days will go badly. What matters is the direction created by the choices you make again and again. Your standards do not live in your plans, they live in your behavior. And when your daily choices begin matching the life you say you want, your standards stop being an idea and start becoming your reality. Chapter 7. Build a life that matches your standards. Your surroundings can quietly shape your behavior long before you notice it. The room you work in, the people you spend time with, the apps you open, the routines you follow, and even the objects within reach can influence what you do each day. You may have strong intentions, but intentions become difficult to maintain when your environment constantly pushes you in the opposite direction. Someone may decide to read every evening, yet keep the television running and the phone beside them. Another may want to save money while receiving constant notifications from shopping apps. Someone may want to become more focused while keeping social media open throughout the workday. The problem is not always a lack of discipline. Sometimes the environment is simply designed around the old standard. Building a better life requires more than deciding what you want. Your surroundings need to support that decision. Think about a person who wants to become healthier. They may genuinely want to exercise, eat better, and sleep properly. But if their daily routine leaves no space for movement, their kitchen is filled with convenient, unhealthy choices, and they stay awake with their phones every night, good intentions have to fight against the environment every day. Eventually, exhaustion wins. Now change the structure. They prepare simple meals in advance. They keep exercise equipment where it is easy to use. They choose a regular time for movement. They charge their phone away from the bed. None of these changes requires extraordinary motivation. The environment simply makes the desired behavior easier. This is an important part of upgrading your standards. Make your better choices easier to repeat. You do not need to depend on willpower for everything. Willpower has limits. It becomes weaker when you are tired, stressed, hungry, distracted, or emotionally overwhelmed. A person who expects themselves to resist every temptation through pure discipline is making life harder than necessary. Smart standards reduce unnecessary battles. If something constantly distracts you, create distance from it. If something helps you focus, keep it nearby. If a certain routine makes your mornings chaotic, redesign the routine. If your schedule is always overloaded, stop treating every request as an obligation. Your environment should not control you, but it should support you. The same principle applies to your use of time. Time is one of the clearest expressions of your standards because everyone receives the same basic 24 hours. The difference is how those hours are directed. You may say that your family matters, but if work receives you every evening, your calendar tells another story. You may say that learning matters, but if every free moment disappears into entertainment, your schedule reveals a different priority. You may say that your health matters, but if sleep is always the first thing sacrificed, your behavior communicates something else. This is not about feeling guilty. It is about making your life consistent with what you claim matters. A useful standard is not simply something you believe, it is something your calendar can prove. That may require saying no. Every yes consumes something. It may consume time, energy, attention, money, or emotional space. Saying yes to everything may feel generous, but it can quietly create a life where there is no room for your own priorities. Imagine your time as a limited room. If every corner is filled, nothing new can enter. A better standard may mean leaving space. Space to think, space to rest, space to learn, space to be with people you love, space to pursue something that matters. Without space, even good goals can become another source of pressure. Your environment also includes the people around you. The attitudes of others can influence what feels normal. If everyone around you constantly complains, wasting time may feel normal. If the people around you value learning and responsibility, growth may feel more natural. This does not mean abandoning everyone who thinks differently from you. People have different personalities, backgrounds, and priorities. Healthy relationships do not require complete agreement, but your closest environment deserves attention. Who encourages your growth? Who respects your boundaries? Who challenges you in a healthy way? Who makes you feel that becoming better is possible? And who repeatedly pulls you toward behaviors you are trying to leave behind? The goal is not to judge people, it is to understand, influence. You become more aware of what you absorb. Sometimes changing your environment means finding new people. Sometimes it simply means reducing the amount of time spent in environments that weaken your focus or confidence. Your digital environment deserves the same attention. The phone in your hand can expose you to hundreds of opinions, advertisements, arguments, and distractions before breakfast. If you consume enough of them, they begin influencing what you think is important. Constant comparison can make an ordinary life feel inadequate. Constant entertainment can make quiet moments feel uncomfortable. Constant negativity can make progress seem pointless. Your attention is not an unlimited resource. Protecting it is part of raising your standards. You do not need to delete everything enjoyable. You simply need to become selective about what gets regular access to your mind. The same principle applies to your physical environment. A cluttered space can make simple tasks feel heavier. A prepared workspace can make starting easier. A clean and organized environment can reduce unnecessary friction. Small environmental changes can create meaningful behavioral changes because they influence what happens before the decision. Instead of repeatedly telling yourself, "I should do better," create conditions that help you do better. Prepare tomorrow's work tonight. Put important items where you can see them. Remove unnecessary distractions. Schedule what matters. Create routines that reduce decision fatigue. Make the right action convenient. These are not glamorous strategies, they are practical ones, and practical changes are often more powerful than dramatic promises. There will still be difficult days. Your environment cannot remove every obstacle. You will sometimes procrastinate, lose focus, or return to an old habit. The goal is not to build a perfect system. The goal is to build a supportive one. Your surroundings should make it easier to return to your standards when you drift away from them. That is what a well-designed life does. It does not demand that you become stronger every minute. It gives your better self fewer unnecessary obstacles. Eventually, your environment begins reflecting your priorities. Your schedule protects what matters. Your space supports your routines. Your relationships encourage healthy growth. Your digital world becomes more intentional. At that point, the life around you starts reinforcing the person you are becoming. You are no longer relying only on motivation to create change. You have built conditions that support it. And when your environment, routines, time and relationships begin matching your standards, living better becomes less about constant struggle and more about making your desired way of life the natural choice. Chapter 8. Raise the standard of your relationships. Some of the strongest influences on your life do not come from books, goals, or routines. They come from people. The people around you can affect your confidence, your expectations, your decisions, and even the way you see yourself. A supportive relationship can give you courage during difficult seasons. A draining relationship can slowly make you question your worth. This is why raising your personal standards must also include the relationships you build and maintain. Healthy relationships are not relationships without problems. Two people can disagree, misunderstand each other, become frustrated, or go through difficult periods and still have a strong relationship. The difference is found in how they handle those moments. Respect remains present. Honesty remains possible. Both people are willing to take responsibility. There is room for boundaries. There is room for growth. Without these qualities, even a relationship that looks close from the outside can become emotionally exhausting. Many people stay in unhealthy relationship patterns because they confuse history with quality. Someone has been in their life for 10 years, so they assume the relationship must remain exactly the same. But time alone does not make a relationship healthy. A long relationship can still contain disrespect. A new relationship can still contain genuine care. What matters is the quality of the connection. Raising your standards does not mean searching for perfect people. Perfect relationships do not exist. It means becoming more aware of what a healthy relationship requires and being willing to contribute to it yourself. This last part is important. It is easy to talk about what other people should do. You may want people to listen to you, but do you listen carefully? You may want honesty, but do you tell the truth when it is uncomfortable? You may want respect, but do you respect other people's boundaries? You may want support, but do you offer support when someone else needs it? Higher relationship standards begin with reciprocity. You cannot demand qualities from others that you consistently refuse to practice yourself. Consider two friends who have known each other for years. One friend constantly complains that the other never makes time for them. But whenever the other person tries to discuss something important, the first friend changes the subject or turns the conversation back to themselves. The problem is not simply that one person needs more attention. The relationship has developed a pattern where both people are not communicating their needs clearly. A higher standard would require a different approach. Instead of collecting resentment, they could have an honest conversation. Instead of expecting the other person to guess, they could explain what they need. Instead of immediately blaming, they could listen. Healthy relationships require communication because silence often creates stories that are not true. Someone does not reply to a message and you assume they are angry. Someone cancels plans and you assume they no longer care. Someone disagrees with you and you interpret it as disrespect. Clear communication can prevent small misunderstandings from becoming large emotional problems. But communication does not mean explaining yourself endlessly to people who have no intention of understanding you. There is a difference between being misunderstood once and being repeatedly dismissed. That difference matters. Boundaries become especially important here. A boundary is not a punishment. It is not a way to control another person. It is a decision about how you will participate in a relationship. You may decide that you will not continue a conversation when someone becomes insulting. You may choose not to answer work messages during certain personal hours. You may limit contact with someone who repeatedly creates unnecessary conflict. You may stop sharing personal information with someone who consistently uses it against you. These decisions are not about becoming cold. They are about protecting what matters. People sometimes fear that setting boundaries will make them selfish. In reality, clear boundaries can make relationships healthier because they remove hidden resentment. When everything is tolerated until frustration becomes unbearable, relationships can become unpredictable. Clear limits create clarity. Another important standard is emotional responsibility. Your feelings are real, but they are not always instructions. You can feel angry without speaking cruelly. You can feel disappointed without punishing someone. You can feel insecure without demanding constant reassurance. You can feel hurt without immediately assuming bad intentions. Emotional maturity gives you space between feeling and reacting. That space can save relationships. Imagine receiving a message that feels disrespectful. Your first reaction may be anger. You could immediately respond with an equally harsh message. The conversation would probably become worse. A higher standard gives you another option. Pause. Understand what happened. Decide what response reflects the person you want to be. This does not mean staying silent when something matters. It means choosing a response that protects your dignity without creating unnecessary damage. The people you choose also matter. Some relationships grow because both people are willing to improve. They celebrate each other's progress without turning everything into competition. They can disagree without becoming enemies. They tell the truth without trying to humiliate each other. Other relationships are built around insecurity. One person feels threatened whenever the other succeeds. Another constantly mocks someone's goals. Someone may repeatedly encourage habits that the person is trying to leave behind. You do not need to hate people who are not good for your current direction. Sometimes you simply need more distance. Growth can change your relationships because your priorities change. When you stop spending every evening in environments built around gossip, excessive drinking, constant complaining, or endless distraction, some connections may naturally become weaker. That can feel lonely. But loneliness during a transition is not always a sign that you made the wrong choice. Sometimes it is the space between an old circle and a new one. As you raise your standards, also become the kind of person you would want to have in your own life. Be dependable, keep your word, listen without immediately trying to win, celebrate people without comparing yourself. Apologize when you are wrong, respect privacy, give honest feedback with kindness, make room for other people's needs. The quality of your relationships improves when you improve the quality of your presence. There is also freedom in accepting that not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some people belong to a particular chapter of your life. You may appreciate what they gave you while accepting that your paths have changed. Holding on simply because of history can prevent both people from moving forward. Letting go does not always mean anger. Sometimes it means acceptance. Your standards should help you recognize the difference between a relationship that needs patience and one that requires distance. They should encourage you to communicate before assuming, forgive without becoming careless, and protect yourself without becoming closed. The purpose is not to build a life where nobody can disappoint you. The purpose is to build relationships where honesty, respect, responsibility, and care have a place. When you raise the standard of your relationships, you are not simply choosing better people. You are creating a better version of yourself within those relationships, and that changes everything. Chapter 9. Keep your standards when life gets hard. Good intentions are easy to maintain when life feels comfortable. You have energy, your plans are working, people are cooperating, and the future looks promising. During those periods, discipline can feel natural. Pressure changes the picture. A difficult week can make healthy routines feel unnecessary. A financial setback can make long-term plans seem pointless. Rejection can make you question your ability. A personal disappointment can make you return to habits you thought you had already outgrown. Hard seasons do not create your character from nothing. They reveal which parts of your character are strong enough to remain when circumstances become uncomfortable. This is why higher standards cannot depend on perfect conditions. You may decide that you want to communicate with respect, but anger will test that decision. You may decide that your health matters, but exhaustion will test it. You may decide to manage money carefully, but disappointment may tempt you to spend for temporary comfort. You may decide to keep working toward an important goal, but failure may make quitting feel easier. The standard becomes meaningful when keeping it costs you something. That does not mean forcing yourself through every situation. Some circumstances genuinely require rest, adjustment, or a change of direction. Holding a high standard is not the same as refusing to adapt. Strength includes flexibility. Suppose someone spends years building a career and suddenly loses their job. Their original plan is no longer possible. Holding their standard does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means keeping the values behind the plan. They can continue valuing responsibility. They can continue learning. They can continue treating people with respect. They can continue preparing for another opportunity. The destination may change while the standard remains. This distinction can protect you from two opposite mistakes. One is giving up completely when life does not follow the plan. The other is becoming so rigid that you refuse to adjust even when adjustment is necessary. A strong person can change direction without abandoning their principles. Failure is one of the greatest tests of this ability. When something goes wrong, the mind often wants a simple explanation. I am not good enough. I always fail. This was a mistake. I should never have tried. Such conclusions feel final, but failure rarely contains only one meaning. Sometimes failure reveals a skill you need to develop. Sometimes it exposes poor preparation. Sometimes the timing was wrong. Sometimes the decision itself was reasonable, but the result was outside your control. A setback becomes useful when you examine it without turning it into an identity. Imagine someone who applies for a position they strongly wanted and gets rejected. They could interpret the rejection as proof that they are not capable, or they could study what happened. Maybe their interview skills need improvement. Maybe another candidate had more experience. Maybe they need a stronger portfolio. The result hurts either way. But only one response creates growth. This is where emotional control becomes part of maintaining high standards. You cannot always control the first emotion that appears. You can influence what happens next. Anger can be felt without becoming cruelty. Fear can be felt without becoming avoidance. Disappointment can be felt without becoming hopelessness. Frustration can be felt without becoming an excuse to abandon everything. Your standards give you something to return to when emotions become loud. Think about a person who has worked hard toward a goal for months and then experiences a major setback. Their motivation disappears. They stop following their routine and begin telling themselves that none of it matters. A better response may be much smaller. Continue one useful action. Make one phone call. Complete one task. Take one walk. Review one lesson. Clean one part of the workspace. Small actions can prevent a difficult period from becoming a complete collapse. You do not always need to feel strong to behave with strength. That idea is important because many people wait for confidence before acting. They believe they need to feel motivated, positive, or certain before returning to their standards. Often, action comes first. The feeling follows later. This does not mean ignoring exhaustion or emotional pain. It means refusing to let temporary feelings make permanent decisions whenever possible. A difficult day deserves compassion. A difficult season deserves support. But neither has to decide the direction of your entire life. Your standards should also include how you treat yourself during failure. Some people become their own harshest critics. They speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to a friend. One mistake becomes a reason to attack their intelligence, discipline, appearance, or worth. That kind of self-talk does not create high standards. It creates fear. Healthy standards allow you to be honest without becoming cruel. You can say, "I handled that badly," without saying, "I am a terrible person." You can admit, "I was undisciplined this week," without deciding, "I will never change." You can recognize, "I made the wrong choice," while still believing, "I can make a better choice next time." Accountability points toward correction. Shame often points toward hiding. If you want to maintain high standards, learn to recover quickly from mistakes. Not perfectly, not instantly, simply more effectively. Return to your routine, repair what you damaged, apologize when necessary, adjust the plan, ask for help when you need it, then continue. Your standard should also survive periods when nobody is watching. It is easy to behave well when other people are paying attention. The deeper test comes when you can take shortcuts without consequences. You know whether you prepared honestly. You know whether you kept your promise. You know whether you treated someone fairly. You know whether you used your time well. Private choices build public character. This is why integrity is one of the strongest forms of personal standards. Integrity means your behavior does not completely change when the audience disappears. The person you are alone is still part of the person you become. Life will eventually test every standard you claim to have. Some tests will be small, others may completely disrupt your plans. You cannot prepare for every circumstance. You can prepare the way you respond. Build standards around values that can survive changing conditions. Responsibility can survive failure. Honesty can survive disappointment. Respect can survive disagreement. Patience can survive delay. Courage can survive uncertainty. These qualities do not require an easy life. They become more meaningful because life is not always easy. Perhaps the most important part of maintaining higher standards is remembering that one bad moment does not erase your progress. You may fall back into an old habit. You may lose your temper. You may waste a day. You may make a decision you regret. None of these moments has to become the final version of your story. The next choice still belongs to you. That is the quiet power of a standard. It gives you a direction to return to. When life becomes difficult, you do not need to become perfect. You need to remain connected to the person you have decided to become. Your circumstances may change, your plans may change, your pace may change, but the values guiding your life can remain steady. And when you learn to carry your standards through difficult seasons, they stop being goals you talk about and become qualities you can depend on when life demands the most from you. Chapter 10. Become the person your standards demand. The most meaningful changes in life begin long before anyone else notices them. They begin in the way you speak to yourself, the choices you make when nobody is watching, the boundaries you protect, and the decisions you repeat when the excitement has disappeared. By now, the idea of raising your standards should feel different from simply demanding more. It is not about chasing an impressive lifestyle. It is not about proving that you are better than other people. It is not about creating impossible expectations. It is about becoming more intentional about the person you are building. Your standards are powerful because they influence your behavior. Your behavior influences your habits. Your habits influence your identity, and your identity eventually affects the direction of your life. This process happens gradually. Nobody wakes up one morning and suddenly becomes disciplined, confident, responsible, selective, patient, and courageous. Those qualities are built through repeated choices. The person you become is being shaped in ordinary moments. You choose whether to keep a promise. You choose whether to tell the truth. You choose whether to protect your time. You choose whether to respond with maturity. You choose whether to continue after disappointment. You choose whether to accept something that does not belong in the life you are trying to build. These decisions may not feel like identity-building moments. They are. Think about someone who has spent years describing themselves as undisciplined. That label may have become part of their identity. Every time they postpone something, they use it as evidence. See, this is just who I am. But identity can change when behavior changes. Suppose that person begins keeping one small commitment every day. They continue even when motivation is low. They become more organized. They stop making promises they cannot keep. Gradually, the evidence begins to challenge the old story. They are no longer simply hoping to become disciplined. They are practicing discipline. Eventually, the statement changes from "I am trying to become disciplined" to "I am someone who follows through." That is a deeper transformation. The same thing happens with confidence. Confidence is often treated as a feeling that must arrive before action. In reality, much of it develops after action. You speak up even though you are nervous. You handle a difficult conversation. You learn something you once thought was beyond you. You recover from a mistake. Each experience gives you evidence. You become more confident because you have seen yourself handle things you once avoided. This is why higher standards should be connected to behavior rather than temporary emotion. You do not need to feel ready every time. You need to know what your standard requires. That clarity becomes especially valuable when life becomes complicated. Imagine having a difficult day at work, receiving disappointing news, and returning home exhausted. Your old pattern might be to abandon everything that matters. You might waste the evening, become short-tempered with people you love, or tell yourself that tomorrow will be different. A higher standard does not require a perfect evening. Perhaps you simply avoid making the situation worse. You rest instead of reacting. You communicate honestly. You take care of one responsibility. You return to your routine the following day. That may not look like a major achievement. It is. Personal growth often happens through ordinary decisions made during difficult moments. Another part of becoming the person your standards demand is learning to stop negotiating with every temporary desire. You will always have reasons to delay. You will always have opportunities to choose comfort. There will always be someone who does less and appears to be enjoying themselves more. There will always be moments when your old habits feel easier. A higher standard gives you a reason to choose differently, not because every difficult choice is automatically better, but because you have decided what deserves your effort. This is where self-respect becomes important again. When you repeatedly act according to your values, you begin to feel more at home with yourself. You do not have to constantly explain your decisions. You do not need everyone to approve. You know why you made the choice. That internal clarity can become a form of freedom. It also changes the way you measure success. Instead of asking only whether you achieved a specific result, you begin noticing who you became while pursuing it. Did you become more disciplined, more honest, more patient, more courageous, more responsible, more selective about where you place your energy? Results matter, but character matters too. A person can achieve a goal while becoming someone they do not respect. They can earn more money while losing every meaningful relationship. They can become successful while living in constant comparison. That is not the kind of upgrade this book is asking you to pursue. The goal is a life that improves without requiring you to lose yourself. This may require redefining what success means. Success can be earning more while still having time for the people you love. It can mean building a career without allowing your job to become your entire identity. It can mean becoming financially responsible rather than simply looking wealthy. It can mean choosing a smaller circle of genuine relationships instead of maintaining dozens of shallow connections. It can mean becoming comfortable with saying no. It can mean protecting your peace without avoiding every difficult conversation. Your standards should help you create a life that feels right from the inside, not merely impressive from the outside. Another important part of this transformation is accepting that growth will never be finished. You may raise your standards today and discover new areas that need attention later. That is not failure, it is development. As your knowledge increases, your understanding changes. As your responsibilities change, your priorities may change. As you experience more of life, you may become clearer about what deserves your time and what does not. Do not turn your standards into rigid rules that prevent you from growing. Let them evolve with wisdom. A standard should provide direction, not imprisonment. You can become more disciplined while learning to rest. You can become more ambitious while remaining grateful. You can become more selective without becoming judgmental. You can become more confident without becoming arrogant. You can protect your boundaries without becoming emotionally distant. Balance keeps your standards human. The final transformation happens when you stop seeing higher standards as something you must constantly force yourself to maintain. They become part of who you are. The person who once struggled to protect their time now naturally considers whether something deserves it. The person who once accepted disrespect now recognizes it quickly. The person who once broke promises to themselves now thinks carefully before making one. The person who once waited for motivation now understands how to act without it. The person who once compared their life with everyone else's now measures success against their own values. Nothing magical happened. They simply practiced a different way of living long enough for it to become familiar. That is how standards become identity, and identity becomes direction. Your future does not require you to become a completely different human being. It requires you to make enough different decisions that your life begins moving in a different direction. You already know some of the standards you need to raise. Maybe you need to protect your time. Maybe you need to take your goals more seriously. Maybe you need to become more careful about the people you allow close to you. Maybe you need to stop making excuses for behavior you know is holding you back. Maybe you need to expect more from yourself. Start there. Choose one standard that matters deeply to you and begin living it consistently. Do not wait until you feel completely prepared. Do not wait for the perfect Monday, the perfect opportunity, or the perfect version of yourself. Begin with the next decision, then make another, then another. Over time, those decisions will become evidence of who you are becoming. Your standards are not merely rules for a better life, they are commitments to a better version of yourself. And when your actions finally begin matching what you know you are capable of, you will understand the deepest meaning of upgrading your standards. You were never simply raising the level of your life. You were raising the level of the person living it. Reading about higher standards is easy. Living by them is where the real work begins. You may finish this book feeling motivated today and feel completely different next week. That is normal. Motivation comes and goes. Your standards become useful when they guide you, even after the motivation disappears. So do not try to change your whole life tomorrow. Start with one area. Maybe your mornings are disorganized. Create a better morning routine. Maybe you waste too much time on your phone. Put limits on your screen time. Maybe you keep delaying an important goal. Give it a fixed place in your schedule. Maybe you accept poor treatment because you are afraid of losing people. Start setting clearer boundaries. Maybe you keep promising yourself that you will change, but rarely follow through. Make smaller promises and keep them. These are simple changes, but simple does not mean insignificant. A better standard is useful only when you can turn it into an action. Instead of saying, "I need to become more disciplined," decide what discipline looks like tomorrow. Instead of saying, "I need better relationships," decide what behavior you will accept and what behavior you will no longer accept. Instead of saying, "I want a better life," decide which part of your current life needs to change first. Make your standards visible through your behavior. You will also need to accept that raising your standards can make some things uncomfortable. You may disappoint people when you start saying no. You may feel guilty when you stop overgiving. You may feel uncomfortable when you leave familiar habits. You may feel uncertain when you choose a different path from the people around you. That does not automatically mean you are making the wrong choice. Growth often feels unfamiliar before it feels natural. Give yourself time to adjust. At the same time, do not turn higher standards into unrealistic expectations. You will have lazy days. You will make mistakes. You will change your mind. You will sometimes choose comfort. You will sometimes fall back into an old habit. Do not use those moments as an excuse to quit. Correct the mistake and continue. The purpose of a standard is not to punish you when you fall short. It is to give you a clear direction when you need one. Keep your standards high enough to challenge you and realistic enough to live by. Most importantly, remember that your standards should belong to you. You do not need to live according to someone else's definition of success. You do not need to buy things you cannot afford to look successful. You do not need to work until exhaustion simply because other people do. You do not need hundreds of friends to prove that you are liked. Decide what a good life means to you, then build around it. Perhaps your version of success is financial freedom. Perhaps it is meaningful work. Perhaps it is having more time with your family. Perhaps it is becoming healthier, calmer, more confident, or more independent. Your life does not have to impress everyone. It needs to make sense to you. And when you know what matters, your standards become easier to choose. Before you close this book, take a few minutes and write down 3 things. What will I stop accepting? What more will I expect from myself? What will I start doing differently? Do not write a perfect answer. Write an honest one, then choose the smallest action that can prove you mean it. That is where the book becomes useful. Not when you remember every chapter, not when you feel inspired, but when something happens tomorrow and you make a better choice because you have changed the way you see yourself. That is the real upgrade. Your life will still have problems. People will still disappoint you. Plans will still fail. Some days will be harder than others. But you can meet those moments with a different standard. You can expect yourself to handle life with more responsibility. You can protect what matters. You can walk away from what repeatedly pulls you backward. You can choose better without needing to become perfect. And you can keep improving without constantly comparing yourself with everyone else. Your standard is the level you decide to live by, so choose it carefully, raise it where it needs to rise, give yourself time to grow into it, then let your daily life prove the decision you made, because the life you want is not somewhere far away waiting for you. It is being built through the choices you make today.